These DIY shelves are cheap, easy to make, and fast to put together, and all you need is plywood, 2x2s, and a few basic tools. For the shelves, I need 6 12-inch deep by 38-inch wide pieces of 3/4-inch plywood, so I bought a sheet at Home Depot and had them cut it down for me, which made it easier to transport and saved me time. One sheet was enough for both shelves with some scrap pieces left over. For the frame, I'm using 2x2s, which are actually 1.5 by 1.5 inches, and cutting each piece before assembling the frame. The first pieces I'm cutting are the corner posts. I need 4 per shelf, and they need to be the same length as the shelf height, which is 40.25 inches. Since I'm making 2 shelves, I need 8 posts in total. Using a measuring tape, I marked the first post at 40.25 inches, then made the cut using my miter saw, but whatever saw you have on hand will work. I measured and cut down the rest of the posts, using the first one as a guide, making sure they're all cut to the same length. I need 2 back cleats per shelf that are the width of the shelves minus the width of the 2 back posts, making the cleats 35 inches long. I cut 4 of these in total, measuring and cutting the first one, then using that as a guide to check the length of the rest. I also need 8 side cleats per shelf that are 1/8 of an inch longer than the depth of the shelves, which are 12 inches deep, making the side cleats 12 1/8 inches long. I cut 16 of the side cleats in total. Adding that extra 1/8 of an inch to the length of the side cleats will give the shelves a little wiggle room so that they easily fit into the frame without being too tight, which you'll see in just a minute. To assemble the frame, I need to drill pocket holes into the side cleats and the back cleats so that they can be attached to the corner posts. To drill the pocket holes, I'm using my Kreg pocket hole jig. I've adjusted the board thickness on the drill guide to 1.5 inches, which is the actual thickness of the 2x2s, and I've adjusted the drill bit to the 1.5 inch depth as well. You want to make sure that when you drop the bit down into the drill guide, that the bit is set long enough to drill into the wood, but not so long that it'll hit or drill into the base. Starting with the side cleats, I'm drilling a pocket hole on both ends of the same side of the 2x2. I lined up the 2x2, keeping it as centered as I could, pushed the clamp down to secure it in place, then drilled down into the guide. With that side done, I flipped it over and drilled a pocket hole into the other side. When you're done, you'll have a cleat that looks like this, with pocket holes on both ends where they'll be attached to the corner posts. I repeated those steps and drilled pocket holes into both ends of the rest of my side cleats. Then, when those were done, I did the same thing with the back cleats, drilling pocket holes into both ends of the same side of those 2x2s. To assemble the shelves, I'm using these 2.5 inch coarse thread pocket hole screws, which is the length that's suggested for 1.5 inch thick wood. I'm starting out by assembling the sides of the shelves. I laid out 2 of the corner posts, then laid 4 of the side cleats down in between the corner posts. To make this as easy as possible, I figured out my shelf spacing, then I made spacers that were the length of the space I needed in between each cleat. Starting with the top cleat, I used a piece of scrap plywood from the shelves to space the cleat down 3/4 of an inch from the top of the post, then drilled one of the screws through the pocket hole, securing the cleat in place. This will leave enough space for the top shelf to sit flush with the top of the post when it's done. I did the same thing on the other side, using the plywood as a spacer and securing the cleat to the post. I decided I wanted 10 inches between the top and the second shelf. To do this, I needed to leave 9.25 inches between the first and the second cleat, so I cut a scrap piece of 2x2 down to 9.25 inches, used that to space out the second cleat, secured it to the first post, then repeated those steps to secure it to the second post. I did the same thing for the third cleat, but this time I used an 11.25 inch spacer to space the third cleat down from the second one, which will end up leaving me 12 inches between the second and the third shelf. For the bottom cleat, I want it to sit 1.5 inches above the floor, so I used a 1.5 inch spacer, held it flush to the bottom of the post, secured the bottom cleat to the first post, then did the same thing securing it to the second post. I need 2 of these side pieces per shelf, so I set the first one aside and made 3 more the exact same way, using the spacers to install each cleat so that they'll all be level with each other when they're done. Once I had all 4 sides built, I took 2 and laid them on the ground with what will be the front of the shelves facing upright and the back of the shelves on the ground. The side with the pocket holes and the cleats should be facing inwards towards each other. I took one of the back cleats and I lined it up at the very top of the side frames with the pocket holes facing upright. Then I used a scrap piece of 2x2 to hold it flush with the top of the post before securing it in place on both sides. I want the top of these shelves to be completely flush, so installing the first cleat level with the posts will let it become part of that top shelf and it'll just blend in seamlessly at the back of the shelf. On the bottom of the frame, I used the same 1.5 inch spacer to attach the bottom cleat at the same level as the side cleats. I set the first frame aside and finished the second one the same way. If you're building taller or wider shelves, it might help to add additional back cleats spaced out the same way as your side cleats, or to use an X shape to keep your shelves squared. Since mine aren't very big and they're going to be secured to the wall, the 2 cleats I have will be plenty. Once the frames were built, I used wood glue and pocket hole plugs to plug the holes in the frame. The top shelf will cover the back cleat, so I didn't worry about that one, but the rest of the holes I went ahead and plugged to give the shelves a more finished look when they're done. Before securing the shelves to the frame, I added countersink holes to both sides of each shelf so that the screws won't be visible. I adjusted the bit to 3/4 of an inch, which is the thickness of the shelves, placed the shelves on top of a few wood slats to raise it off of the ground, then drilled the countersink holes into the end of each shelf. I drilled the countersink holes about 3/4 of an inch from the edge of each shelf so that the holes should be lined up with the center of the cleats underneath them. I drilled 1 on each side since I just need the screws to keep the shelves from sliding around, but you could do 2 on each end if you'd like. After drilling the countersink holes, I dry fit the shelves, making sure everything fit right, then took the shelves off and attached each one, starting with the bottom shelf, making sure the sides were lined up with the edge of the cleats before screwing them in place. As a side note, the bottom cleats can support a shelf as well. I just decided to leave it open so I can store larger storage bins on the floor underneath that bottom shelf. Either way, you still need cleats at the bottom as well for additional support for the shelving units. Once the shelves were attached, I used wood putty to fill in the screw holes. After the wood putty dried, I sanded down the shelves, then using my paint sprayer, I applied 1 coat of primer and 2 coats of paint. I've linked all of the tools and supplies down in the description box for you guys, and if you have any questions, let me know down in the comment section. Thank you so much for watching, and until next time, you can check out one of these videos linked right here.